Hi, I'm Chloe with Gardens of Babylon, and I would like to take you on one of my favorite gardens that I have built in the last year. This is a Cumberland River adjacent garden that is perennial heavy. Originally, the client had moved in needing some privacy, and then as her needs progressed, she decided that she wanted a garden that would invite butterflies, native perennial or native pollinators, and lovely butterflies into her garden. To quote Miss Josephine, she said, I am too old to wait for a garden to be built. And as one of my mentors said, the best landscaping is a balance between budget and patience. So anyway, come with me and we'll go take a little quick tour. So starting off, I'd love to point out these beautiful native Juniper virginiana, which provide a gorgeous evergreen screen, providing a really nice natural line of privacy without seeming super stiff. And so I love the natural texture and the change in needle shape that the junipers provide. They also tend to do really well on slopes because they can accommodate the water changes between where they will sit in water versus where water is not super available without creating a big difference in foliar display. I wanted to use one of my all-time favorite natives. This is a leatherleaf viburnum. They bloom first thing in spring. They remain semi-evergreen, and they get to be about 6 to 8 feet tall. The scent in early spring is really unparalleled. They're a critical pollinator nectar source right between kind of our early spring pollinators and our mid-spring pollinators, which is a really tough time in Tennessee because typically we go from freezing cold to hell's front porch. And so not a lot blooms between like mid-April to early May. And these are great stand through for our pollinators there. I also really wanted to provide a lot of interest, but with brush strokes with the perennial. So I wanted some catmint here, some salvia here, using lots of yarrow. So as you'll see pockets of brush strokes of color with different bloom type, with different bloom shape. And that was really important to me because I didn't want for this to feel like a static garden. I wanted for it to feel like it had a lot of movement and like it had an established border in front of the more like woody perennials, but I didn't want for it to feel like it was just a little row of soldiers going down the edge. Before we get too far into going down the garden though, I'd like to turn your attention to one of my favorite trees on the planet. This is a Vitex agnus castus, and it's a chase tree. And the scent is just unparalleled. It is, it's woody, it's a little bit herbaceous, like a lavender, and not just the bloom smell like that, but the entire leaf system, everything about it is scented. And it is about to burst into bloom. It has the same bloom period as a crepe myrtle. And so if you want an alternative for a multicolumnar tree that is drought tolerant, incredibly adaptable, and it comes in 3 different sizes typically. So it'll come in a super dwarf, which is like the 2 to 3 foot range, the medium size, which is the 5 to 8 foot range, and then the true size, which is going to be the 10 to 15 foot range. You really have so many options for this gorgeous blooming tree that tends to bloom in a bluish lavender color. Another thing that was really important, because we were planting here by the Cumberland, is tried to incorporate as many nativars as possible. So those are cultivars that may not necessarily be straight species of natives, but they're cultivars that have been tried and tested in urban gardens that will perform just as well as our native. So our native bees, butterflies, pollinators all know and can identify them as nectar sources. So Acalia or yarrow was a huge option for this garden. Our salvia, our meadow sage was a huge option. And then our echinacea was also a big choice. Rudbeckia is also incorporated into the garden. It's not quite blooming yet, but it should be in the next 2 weeks. And they are just our most prized perennials because they're bulletproof, they're hard workers, and they're just so freaking joyous. Okay, so another great native is going to be our azaleas. We have a couple of encores here, which are of course the evergreens. They're going to bloom twice a year. Their leaves are going to retain throughout the winter season, and unlike our native azaleas, which are deciduous, they still attract pollinators spring and fall. We have another few leather leaves through here, and then of course we have the buddleia, which is one of the butterfly bushes. Oh my God, the scent is unparalleled. It smells a little bit like an herbaceous lilac. Buddleia is one of my favorite alternatives to lilac because it's scented. It has the same flower shape that attracts the same proboscis shape for the insects. So this is my all-time favorite pollinator that I'm using right now. This is the Powwow Wildberry Echinacea. She is an Echinacea purpurea. She is from the straight species. However, she's been bred to be between the 2.5 and 3 foot space. I love her because as her first gen of blooms come out, they turn this beautiful soft magenta. And then as they fade, the petals antique to a really soft pink, so you get a really nice undulation. And then in the fall, the goldfinches, you'll see working shifts on the seed heads, which is really nice for people who are birders as a nice extra protein source. We do have also one of my favorite cultivars of oak leaf hydrangeas, or the hydrangea quinquefolia, which is going to be the ruby slippers. She is technically a dwarf. Now, while most quinquefolias are going to be in the 7 to 9 foot range, this girl stays pretty petite, so she'll stay between the 4 and 6 foot range. However, that's if you do not cut her back or deadhead her. So she can get every bit as big as 7 feet if left unwieldy. So I do just want to prepare people for that. Like, she's not just like, oh my gosh, we're just going to be super dwarf. But the beautiful thing about these is they start off super white, and then as the modified leaflets antique, they turn this lovely lime green or chartreuse, and then they antique to this gorgeous red. And then in fall, they turn this really vibrant red. And then in conjunction or juxtaposition to the leaves turning that burgundy color, it's a really lovely fall display since everything here tends to fade to yellow. I'd like to also highlight 2 of my other favorites on the property. One of these is Caryopteris. So this is a dwarf longwood blue. This is very similar to the buddleia. This has a really deep flower nectar source, which means the proboscis of the native swallowtails and butterflies is really only accessible to them. And so you'll also see like sleeping bees, because they create this little nest for them to rest in when they've collected so much nectar that they just can't fly home. So one of my favorites. And then there's also some Elysium, which is another great native. The blooms are not really anything to write home about. However, you can see that these are about to burst into bloom, and they are a favorite of our native pollinating flies. But they're a fantastic evergreen for a shady space where a laurel just won't have enough light, or a holly will just not perform and create that density, and you need something kind of dwarfed. And then this is one of my all-time favorites. So I was adopted by my aunt and uncle, and my aunt is really the person who got me into gardening. And her favorite pollinator is Liatris baccata. And so every opportunity that I have to plant this unbelievable pollinator, I mean, look at this gorgeous little bumble hanging on the Liatris. She is a repeat bloomer. She is low maintenance. She creates height and texture and drama, both with her blooms and with her leaf texture. And so it's a little homage to the woman who raised me and got me into my love of horticulture and botany to plant these in a garden. One of the most beautiful parts of this garden is that it sits underneath of one of the largest cottonwoods in Davidson County. And so the garden shifts from being full sun into full shade at the back. And so incorporating things like the guacamole hostas, which bloom purple and are scented and delightful, along with some of our native Dryopteris ferns, as well as some of our blue angels, and then our helleborus are amazing. I love using some of the cephalotaxis here just because even though they're a Japanese spreading yew, they provide some evergreen interest without interfering with the root systems of the native silver maple and the cottonwood surrounding. And then one of my favorite things that we were luckily able to add here is a slew of some native rabbit eye blueberries. And I don't know if you can see that they're fruiting, but they also, the blooms are white with a purple blush, and then in the fall they create this gorgeous red patina throughout the landscape. And then even in winter they have an amazing, interesting structure. So really you get a full 4 seasons of interest off of our native rabbit eye blueberry. That is just one of my all-time favorites to incorporate into a landscape. Oh look! So this is the Riverside garden. It starts up here, starting with some native river oats. And then as we move down, we have tried to incorporate a little bit of varied interest, right? So this stays native as well as with the native cottonwoods, native maples. However, over here, Eric incorporated some beautiful native rock, which is native to Tennessee, and then we added in some dwarf arborvitaes and then some dwarf roses, drift roses that will bloom spring and early fall. But really what this area is this is supposed to be a very low maintenance area where they can just come and enjoy dinner and then go down to the pontoon boat